everybody? Manny here once again. Welcome to DFS Zone, your source for daily fantasy sport lineup advice for the NFL and NBA. Got a brand new video to share with you guys today. I would like to discuss some possible good plays for us at receiver this week, week 5 of the NFL. But before I get started, I appreciate you guys drop a like. And if you're new to the channel, have not subscribed as of yet, please do so down below. Put on your post notifications. This way you don't miss out on any of my NFL videos as well as NBA, as we're about to begin the NBA season very shortly. I do have a live show that I conduct for the NFL every Saturday night at 7 p.m. where we discuss game stacks, team stacks, strategies, tips, low value plays, sneaky plays, sleeper plays, whatever you want to consider, as well as the 4 o'clock slate. We go over the injury report. We just have fun. We discuss football. I take as many questions as possible. I try to answer everybody's question to the best of my ability. And I'm on here for about a good hour and a half pretty much every Saturday night. So if that is of any interest to you, definitely subscribe down below. And it'll be conducted the same way with the NBA. I do a live show for the NBA. It will be conducted 1 hour before game lock, and it'll be pretty much 4 or 5 days a week, except for Saturday and Sunday, where I will not be doing any live shows. But other than that, live shows, plenty of content. So if that is of any interest to you guys, definitely join the family. Subscribe down below, put on your post notifications, and basically that is it. So with all that out of the way, let's discuss the best possible plays, at least in my opinion, this week that I'm looking at. It's a lot of good plays at wide receiver this week. This is one of the things I discussed when I talked about the quarterbacks, was that I'm going to pair some of those quarterbacks that I gave you guys, my viewers, yesterday. We'll have some of those receivers involved today. But we're going to discuss those receivers right now. Antonio Brown, hands down in play, big game for Pittsburgh. You definitely got to consider Antonio Brown as well as Juju Schuster. For me, I'm willing to not pay up for Antonio. Granted, I'm being very honest with you. I'm very frank. Antonio Brown will be in some of my lineups. I will have exposure to Antonio Brown. I'm not selecting him as one of the plays that I want to give to you guys, the viewers. I think that you can pay down a little bit and get still some good quality play. So we're going to come down. Julio Jones is definitely in play. Same matchup. He is the top receiver in the league as far as yardage is concerned. He's going to definitely be needed here in this game. Big game for Atlanta as well on the road. I would expect Julio Jones to be very good here. I think he's in a good, favorable position. Pittsburgh definitely has their problems. They've given up the 3rd most fantasy points per game to receivers this year. We're talking about the Steelers here at 49.6 and 39.4 DK points with 7 touchdowns. So there is opportunity, obviously, here for Jones as well as Mr. Ridley. So, but Julio Jones is not the first guy I'm going to talk about. I'm bypassing Green, Beckham, and I'm going all the way down to Adam Thielen. I love the matchup between Minnesota and Philadelphia. This is a rematch of the NFC Championship game. Adam Thielen and the Vikings definitely will love to get a little payback here going into Philly. He's 8,300, 7,700 on DK. He is the 2nd leading receiver in the NFL right now as far as yardage is concerned. He's had 56 targets, and he has had 40 receptions with 118 yards per game and 2 touchdowns. 71.4% catch percentage ratio is absolutely great. I mean, he's doing very well there. He's averaging pretty much here, as you look at all these targets, 12, 19, 13, 12. He's pretty much averaging like 12, 13 targets per game. I would say 14 targets per game. Pretty much 13 or 14 per game. He's averaging 11.8 yards per catch. I mean, these numbers are just incredible, man. He's had a 45-yard reception catch thus far this year and 6 20-plus yard receptions. What I like about Adam Thielen is just the amount of targets he gets. He is definitely very much involved in his offense. You know, when you get that many targets and you're able to also, you know, pull those suckers in. He has 4 straight 100-yard games. And as far as PPR and the 100 yards per game point total that they give you the additional points for those 100-yard games in on DK. He's definitely a great DK play at 7,700. But this game, man, implied totals in this game are not high. They're not the highest out of the slate. But I love games. I'm being honest with you. I love games when when you have 2 offensive teams and one team is pretty good offensively, got a good group of guys, and you got a game that's only one team is favored only by 3, 24-21, 45 implied total for this game. You gotta love the factors of incorporating this as a game stack, because you know that the key players are going to get tons of snaps. They're going to be on the field almost the entire game, bearing any injuries, God forbid. and you're going to get the most out of everybody here, you know, and especially if this game stays close or even goes into overtime, you're going to get additional fantasy points, and that's what we really want. So I love targeting games like this, but Adam Thielen definitely in play here, man. Going up, Minnesota's 5th in pass offense this year, 327 yards per game and 10 touchdowns. Obviously, Mr. Thielen is very much a part of that. They're going up against Philadelphia's defense, which is 19th, a little bit below the halfway point of as far as the mid-tier level of NFL teams. 272 yards per game, 7 TDs. They have also given you know, you can believe that they have been targeted. Their secondary has been targeted 100 times this year by the opponents, but they have only given up 64 receptions for 836 yards. They're 4th in the NFL with the most amount of fantasy points given to receivers thus far this year. And that is very important for me. That's something that I always check off. So they are fourth in the league. They're giving up 41.8 DK points to receivers and 37.6 Fanduel points. And you consider what they're giving up, 37 and 48. Now you think about Adam Thielen, and you can make a strong case for Stephon Diggs here. I definitely like Diggs. I will have a little exposure to Diggs as well. I just love Thielen a little bit better. But between both of them, 19, you pretty much 20 from him and about 17, 16 from Mr. Diggs. You got over close to 40 fantasy points per game, and this team is they're capable of putting up this amount against this team and then some. So just by knowing that they have given up 48 and 37 respectively. And a case, like I said, making the case for Diggs. I mean, Diggs is he has about 12 less targets than Thielen, but he is still averaging about 11.5 yards per catch, which I like. And he also has had a 75-yard reception, which I also like. We also know that he's the speedster. He is the big playmaker on the team. So he is someone you should always consider if you're not going to think about Adam Thielen in any offense. When you're thinking Minnesota's offense, you got to think either Thielen or Diggs, plain and simple with Mr. Cousins. So you always got to pair them up. So this week I like Thielen with Cousins, but definitely a strong case for Stephon Diggs for $100 cheaper if you wanted to go that route. My next receiver that I'm going to discuss is Mr. Juju SmithSchuster. Remember I said earlier when I started the video, I definitely have exposure to Antonio Brown. I'm just going to have more exposure to Juju. Juju Smith, 8,000 pretty much here on Fanduel. He's 7,500 on DK. He has 20-point upside, 15-point ass. You can see he had a 25 spot here 3 weeks ago against Kansas City. What I like is he's had 3 100-yard games, and he's getting more than enough targets, 11. He's averaging about 12 targets a game, 13 targets a game. Did have a poor game here against Baltimore, but again, that is Baltimore. They are probably the best defense in the AFC by far this year. So, I mean, but I think this is a bounce-back game here going up against Atlanta. This gentleman has 104 yards per game, averaging 12 targets per game, has 1 TD, 13.4 yards per catch, and he has a 65-yard reception this year and 7 20-plus yard receptions. Pittsburgh is the 3rd best offense as far as scoring in the NFL as far as yards are concerned, 339 yards per game and 8 touchdowns. This game has the highest implied totals for this week, so it's going to be definitely a shootout. You know he's going to get some targets. 56.5 implied totals. Pittsburgh is supposed to be favored by 3.5. Atlanta's defense is 25th in pass defense this year. They're coughing up 284 yards per game and 9 touchdowns. The receivers are putting up 7 TDs against us. That means the other 2 TDs either came from the quarterback rushing in or running backs. 681 yards. They are 7th in points allowed to wide receivers, 7th most in the NFL. 45 DK points and 36.2 Fanduel points. Another thing that I found very interesting in this game as opposed to the other player with Juju is Atlanta in the red zone. Their defense has struggled in stopping the opponents. 81.2% of the time the opponents have scored a touchdown. Opponents are getting down there at least 4 opportunities per game and putting in 3 touchdowns per game. Pittsburgh's offense, on the other hand, hasn't been as good, but they've been efficient. 77.7 conversion ratio in the red zone. They're only getting in there 2.5 times pretty much on average a game, and they're only putting in 1 field goal and 1 touchdown. They need to convert better in this matchup here, and I think they will against the Atlanta Falcons. But I love Mr. Juju SmithSchuster in this matchup here. So definitely some Juju Smith. I highly recommend him. My next guy, you got to have something with Derek Carr. So I got to go with either Mr. Nelson or Mr. Cooper. Amari Cooper is 6,500 and he's 5,500 on DK. He's averaging 11.1 fantasy points per game, but he has 20-point upside. He finally broke out 2 games. He has had at least 10 targets or better. He has had a total of 39 targets the entire year, but in the last few games, he's had 20 targets here. In the last 3 games, I mean, actually 20 receptions, and he's put up 261 yards and a touchdown. So we need to convert more touchdowns here, and I think this offense is really starting to click right now. Derek Carr has been fantastic. In the last 2 or 3 weeks, he's been solid. His completion percentage is very good. He's up there in that category. And now the offense is starting to get all these players involved. A couple of weeks ago, it was just Amari. 1 week was Mr. Cook. 1 week was Nelson. Last week, everything came together, including Marshawn Lynch. They're going to be in a good matchup here this week for both of them to capitalize. If it's not Cooper that you're on, you definitely should be on Jordy Nelson. You could be. You could make a case to utilize both. You know, you could definitely go that route. He's averaging 12.9 yards per catch, and he has had 4 20-plus yard receptions this year. We're going to go right down real quickly to Mr. Nelson. And I like Mr. Nelson a little bit more here, 5,600. He is 4,500 on DK. He's averaging 12.4 fantasy points, and as you can see in the last 2 weeks, is more like 20. Over 200 yards in receiving yardage, 11 receptions in the last 2 weeks out of 16 targets. So I'm loving that. 68.5 yards per game, and he's averaging 17.1 yards per catch. Good old Jordy Nelson getting it done. He has had 3 receptions of 20-plus yards. I'm loving all that. Oakland's pass offense is 4th best in the NFL, averaging 337 yards per game and 6 touchdowns. They need to get better there, but they are at a good completion ratio of 71%. The Chargers coming in 21st in pass defense, 276 yards per game and 10 touchdowns. The 10 touchdowns is the 4th most in the NFL. They're the 6th worst defense in allowing fantasy points to receivers. They've given up 45.6 DK and 37.8 Fanduel points. As you can see, all the ones that I mentioned here, huge amounts of fantasy points. This is why I say there is going to be an opportunity this weekend. It's going to be a lot of high implied. There are already a high, several games high implied totals. So you know for a fact that total fantasy point total is going to be high. You're going to need to score like 230, maybe 240 to be able to take down a GPP this week. And I think that's going to be very high, maybe even higher than that. Is the possibility. Getting back to this, the Chargers red zone defense, 61.5% of the time opponents are scoring at least a touchdown. They have been there at least 3.5 opportunities per game against this defense, and they've been scoring pretty much 2 touchdowns every time they get down there. So Oakland is going to have an opportunity to capitalize there. And like I said, man, either one of these guys, you cannot go wrong. Either Jordy Nelson, between Jordy Nelson and Amari, if they both go off, they pretty much are putting up 12 and 11. So that's about what? 23, 25 fantasy points. And this team is giving up about 36 Fanduel points to receivers per game thus far this year. So there's an opportunity for, it's a nice upside there for Jordy Nelson and Amari Cooper. And we can see, as well as Amari and Jordy, they've both been able to get up there in the mid-20s in at least one contest. So they have an opportunity here to both put up probably 20. I would not be at all opposed to putting them in the lineup together with Derek Carr, but I would say for the main slate, you could pair them up. We could pair Derek Carr with one of these guys, or at least you should, if you are thinking of having Derek Carr as your quarterback. I love them for the 4 o'clock slate. Definitely would love to pair them up with Derek Carr. There will be some exposure by me at the 4 o'clock slate with these 2 guys and Mr. Carr in a few of my lineups. And that's pretty much where I'm at, guys. That's what I think are the best possible plays, man. Again, I will discuss more value plays, more possible good plays. There's a ton of good plays here. I mentioned already there was some that I definitely think you guys should consider. It's going to be like that. But again, you want to be able to find some good pieces, and you want to be able to find a few that are a little bit value. So hopefully these will work out for you. Again, drop a like on the video, man. The tight end and the defense video will be out a little bit later as well. So look for that. And if you haven't subscribed yet to the channel and you want to continue to get this great information, man, just make sure you subscribe down below. Put on those post notifications. Become a part of the DFS Zone family. And I welcome you with that. And with that, I bid you guys a farewell. I'll see you guys on the next video.